So let's talk about your experience, like settling down in São Paulo and just trying to like navigate the culture. What were the things that were the biggest culture shock for you initially?
First of all, I thought it was strange how no one went out in midweek, because in London, like there's always stuff going on every day of the week, and you go out and it's like open mic nights and comedy clubs and pub quizzes, and there's always something to get out of the house, because I think people want to get out of the house there and go somewhere warm and see friendly people and just like disassociate for a bit. And here it's very much like you go out at the weekend and see your friends, and then the rest of the time you just spend at home, like getting stuff done and, you know, watching Netflix and stuff. And I think it's partly to do with the size of the city, because it's difficult to get around. It might also just be because I'm no longer single and kind of settled down, and I don't need to go out and meet new people. I'm quite happy with the people I know already. Maybe I just got old and I didn't feel like doing that so much, but it did strike me as kind of a big difference when I first got here. It was like Tuesday night, and I was like, is this it? Are we going to stay here, stay indoors? And but now I've got used to it and I quite like it. So,
but that's interesting, because when we think of Brazil, we're like, people are partying all the time. I think people just assume everything is Rio, and you know, people are just out partying on the beach all day long or all night long.
No, I know there are things to do. It's just maybe I've personally become less inclined to like seek them out and leave the house.
What about the people? What are the differences that you notice when it comes to the way people, you know, communicate? Let's maybe talk about that.
So everyone is very open and welcoming, and even if they don't know you, you know, they'll try and strike up a conversation with you, which that was one thing that took me a long time to get used to, because in London, like no one talks to each other. Gabi, I remember she when she came to live with me, she was like getting a bus to the tube to her course every day. And it was always the same people at the bus stop. And she was like, okay, I'm going to strike up a conversation and introduce myself, because that's what you do in Brazil. And in Brazil, it even gets to the point where people know each other so well that they have like a secret Santa at the end of the year and buy each other gifts, and like they're all on first name terms. And the first time she tried it, she was like, hi. And this, like, everyone just ignored her in stony silence. And one guy actually got up and walked off because he was so like shaken by the whole experience, and he just couldn't cope. And so that's a big difference. People here, like if you get in a taxi, or if you go to the doctors, or like I remember once I was at the gym in the changing rooms, and this guy walks up to me with no clothes on and was like, hey, how are you? I've seen you around, you know. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? Is this normal? Like, what do I do? So I was just like polite about it. But also, like, if you're not in the mood and you feel like, and I'm very much not in the mood quite a lot because I'm quite introverted, you can just opt out and say, like, you know, and just kind of let the conversation die out. It's not an aggressive friendliness. It's like if it's just a pastime, you know. But even that is very different to what I'd experienced in London, where even if you go to like a gathering of friends and it's friends of friends, it's almost like you kind of take turns to introduce yourself, and it's all very formal and like, well, my name is, and I know the host from my time at uni, and it's lovely to meet you all. And then it goes on to the next person, which is again something Gabi found hilarious when she first went there. Because in Brazil, it's just a free-for-all that everyone talks over each other, and if you want to get a word in edgeways, then you have to kind of impose yourself. But I like it. I've grown used to it, and I like the fact that people just want to get to know you. I think being a foreigner lends me a certain, like, more people want to talk to me than if I was just a regular Brazilian, because they're like, oh, that's interesting. You're a foreigner living in Brazil. How did that happen? Why did you choose here? Like, why aren't you back in the UK? And that's just a natural conversation starter. So, but what Brazilians do that I think is amazing is they can talk at length about a given subject off the top of their head without, you know, stuttering or repeating themselves. And they do it in a really eloquent way that, like, it seems like it's been prepared in advance, but it hasn't. Like, if it's someone's birthday, they'll post the thing on Instagram, but they'll also send like an audio message, and they will just give this like beautiful 5-minute speech about how much that person means to them, and, you know, how they wish them all the best for the upcoming year, and like it's another year and it's all like poetic flourishes. And I was like, that's amazing. I've never seen anyone do that before. Whereas in the UK, like, people just avoid public speaking in general, and when they do, it's usually prepared, and they're not very good at it, and there's a lot of like umming and ahhing. like myself included, I said when I was doing the video, like I have a script here that's telling me exactly what to say, because if I was improvising, it wouldn't be as good, you know. And I don't know why that is. Like a lot of people in the comments say it's like education, and there's a lot of focus put on like spoken word in school, and you have to be good at like justifying your answers, and there's a whole like oral examination that people have to go through, which I guess makes sense. Also, I feel like the family unit there's a lot more talking going on, and if you want to get your point across or like get a word in edgeways, you have to really impose yourself and have like a well rehearsed like speech planned. There's a lot of noise. I think the one thing that I can't really get used to here is how much background noise there is, like wherever you are. I guess because we live in a big city and there's a lot of like roadworks going on, but also they have these like carros de son, which are sound cars that just drive around with a massive loudspeaker on the back, like advertising like eggs or whatever they're selling. Or now it's the election year, so they're advertising like political candidates, and it's just like this never-ending. And they are illegal. Like you're not supposed to do it, but no one really does anything about it. Like there's no noise police in London. There is a specific like noise police who will crack down on you if you do anything like that immediately, and people will tell on you and like ring up the police and say there's a guy outside, come and take him down, because there's just zero tolerance for that kind of thing. In Brazil, it's just very noisy all the time, and even if you go to the beach, there'll be a guy with like a huge speaker on his back, like pumping out this noise that you don't necessarily want to hear. And I find it weird because I think Brazilians, like apart from that, they're very good at standing up for their rights and like not really compromising to make other people happy. They feel like they're entitled to, you know, peace and quiet or whatever, and or they're entitled to, you know, they've worked hard for their money, so they want the best deal, and they'll go elsewhere if it's too expensive, and they're usually quite unyielding. But for some reason, maybe because of like the upbringing in a very noisy environment, they just consider it normal to be noisy all the time. So that's another thing that I've actually tried and failed to get used to, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I when I was in Mexico City, that used to annoy me so much, and I just thought, what is the point? Like, what are we in the 1990s? Is this still the form of advertisement? Like, we have enough. You can use online, you know, digital media, whatever. There's so many ways that you can promote your product.
Yeah.
Like, but eggs for this many reais, like but it's like for old people. They're like, oh, eggs, you know, and then they go buy
I imagine
them.
that's the audience, because they always do the same route, and I think the same people always come down from the towers to like buy. And I'm sometimes I walk by them and I think, oh, that's actually quite a good deal, but I refuse to buy, like out of principle, because of how much the noise pollution, you know.
But the first point that you raised is also very interesting to me. I used to teach English, and I worked in an international school, and the majority of my students were either Asian, Japanese, or Brazilian. And I love this example because it really illustrates really well how Brazilians are, where Japanese people come very early to classes. They would have everything prepared. Everything would be written down. They would carefully jot the notes, like following my every word. But when it came to speaking and actually saying something, they got so nervous. And Brazilians, on the other hand, would waltz in late. They were always partying because they were in Canada for the summer, you know.
Right.
And they wrote nothing down. They didn't do anything. But somehow, out of the two, the Brazilians' like fluency got so much better than the Japanese, simply because they were just not afraid to improvise. They were like, I had this one kid, Rodrigo, I can't do the accent. He would get up in front of the class and he would just be like talking about, he's like, hi guys, today I wanted to talk about my operation on my third nipple. Like everything was, you know, you could talk about anything. And yeah, that's something that I noticed as well. And I think it's just something that they feel comfortable with, is just, you know, just talking.
Maybe that's why Brazilian men have so much, you know, managed to sweep you off your feet, you know, despite all the red flags or whatever that people have about them, because they talk a good game, you know, there's never a dull moment. There's never a lull in the conversation.
I agree. And I think vocality and tactility are two very Brazilian traits. And I don't want to say that all Brazilians have them, but I would say a large percentage of Brazilians are very vocal and very physical. And I think you can be introverted, you can be extroverted, but still this like physicality, I think is unlike, and, you know, coming from the UK, I'd love to hear your thoughts because you're not a very physically affectionate country, are you?
No. And that was weird even when I went to France and people started doing the bees on both cheeks. And we were like, whoa, what's that all about? So I've been forewarned because of that. I knew that happened, you know, in other countries, but it was still a shock. And I think it's great. You know, I think the English should be more hands-on and like, you know, I think it's a good way of showing that you're comfortable being around people, you know, within limits, obviously, that you shouldn't overstep the boundaries or whatever. But I like that I like the vocality and the tactility, as you say. I think it puts you at ease, you know, it gets you talking yourself because, you know, you feel like you have to meet them halfway. If you're in like a social gathering and you're not in the mood, like you've had a long day and you didn't sleep well and you're like very tired, you still you force yourself to get into the mood because you don't want to let the group down as a Brazilian. Like you'll stick forks in your leg to stay awake, but you won't leave and say, guys, I'm going home for an early night. Whereas I have always been like, if I'm not enjoying myself, I will just say so and be like, guys, I'm sorry, can we do this some other time, you know, and just leave. Or often I'll just fall asleep at the table and Gabi will be like mortified and say like, sorry guys, he's not. So I think there's a lot more just directness about what you want. And another example is like in Brazil, if someone comes around to your house unannounced just to say hi, like you'll be happy to see them. But if you've got an appointment later that afternoon, like in the UK, you'd just be like, okay, well, it's been lovely to see you, but now I have to leave. Would you mind seeing yourself out? In Brazil, no, they'll either miss the appointment or they'll be like, okay, I've got this appointment. I'm really sorry. Like we can travel together if you want. We can get a taxi and we can keep talking. You can come to the appointment with me, you know, rather than risk offending the guest. And there's a very kind of welcoming, it's the flip side to being really welcoming and open is that you don't really know how to shut people out. You're scared that no matter how you do it, you're going to offend them and you'll never hear from them again. I don't know what the thinking is, but there's much more of a kind of communal atmosphere where the needs of the group are greater than the need of the individual kind of